Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm going to be talking about essentially three areas of that are going to be impacted, and there are another 5 to follow, which I will cover next week. So these three big ideas is this idea about changing the transport, especially it comes to cars. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the aerospace, where we're going to be talking about the reusable rockets. And we've had some good sort of progress on that. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about Starlink. Now, all these things I've talked to you before, but today we'll go and approach it from a slightly different angle, and we'll sort of see why we should be thinking more about these ideas, because these are ideas of our time now. We need to be able to partake of or involve ourselves in this development that is with us. So here we are. He's not only talking about these 3 or 4 that I mentioned, but he's got these other projects as well, which I'll talk to you next week. I think we should cover all his grand vision. Okay, why is he sort of important from our lives, for our lives, as it were? You see, he thinks and acts on a very large, at a cosmic level. And of course, that involves, of course, space travel and Mars colonization and rocketry of one sort or the Moon project. So we have a number of space, if you like, projects that are going to be facilitated by his very innovative, not innovative, yeah, if you live, inventive type of rockets, which are reusable. So that is going to be making for a big difference. So he thinks on a very grand level, at grand scale. And of course, you know, he's thinking about global transport in terms of all motor cars, making them electric, and reusable rockets, of course. And of course, all his projects take on almost every major industry and global problem conceivable. So if you look at his projects, they're impinging on all of humanity. That's why in one of my lectures some weeks ago, when I was looking at the global leadership, he came right on top as far as my sort of listing goes, along with, you know, politicians who are doing the best they can with their countries. But in terms of affecting all humanity, he stands out, in my opinion, and therefore I put him at number 1. So what are these industries that are impacted? Energy to transport, healthcare, automobile, energy, healthcare, industrials, infrastructure. This is the media, technology and media, transport services. So what he's doing impacts all these areas. And that's quite remarkable for one person. And he's doing it using his own money, which is quite an exceptional type of facility that he has, that he's got the brains and the money to be able to pursue his ideas. So he has this, he's the chief executive officer of Tesla and SpaceX. SpaceX has not been put on the stock market as yet. Tesla has been, and I'll talk about it later in a bit more detail as to where we are headed there. And the SpaceX is his basic idea that he pursues.
Shafiq, sorry, can I interrupt you? Can everybody mute themselves? Half the people are not muted.
Oh, sorry, I've muted everybody else.
Yeah, but half of them aren't. And I've got all this other feedback coming
All
through.
right, so let me mute all. I think they're all muted, actually. Ross, they're all muted.
Thank you. I think
Okay.
you've done it now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, except you're not muted. Now you are. Okay, good. So we are going to be, again, thinking of his grand sort of vision. We've talked about it in various ways before, but today I want to address that again, because he's so much in the news, but not really covered by the news. Therefore, we can talk about it a bit more. So his plans to sort of colonize Mars, and then of course this AI is so important for us all. So he thinks that if we don't do something about it quickly enough, AI will make humans its pets. That's it's the stuff of science fiction, as it were, but not that sort of far-fetched now. So he's got this hype, of course, but because of his money and all that, he's able to put into projects that he thinks that is going to make a difference to humanity. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about three of these things. The automotive industry, where Tesla is boomed this year. In the previous years, it wasn't doing very much because he was developing it, very rapidly, both the technology and the sites and the production facilities. And this year, despite the pandemic, he is sort of really going to town on increasing the production capacity. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. So it's become so much so now that it's the most highly valued car maker in the world. If you take all the others, Toyota used to be at one time the most highly valued, but now that's been pushed to the background, and Volkswagen. So this company, car company, I think the value of the shares are something of his value of the company, capital cost of the enterprise, the project is about over 400 billion. So you can see how big it's become. Aerospace, of course, he was talking about wanting to make a freeway to Mars by reduce the cost of flying a spaceship for a fraction of the cost that is today's. Because to colonize Mars, you need to send lots of stuff across, and he's preparing for that. And he's going to be doing that through his other projects, because telecommunication, where he's bringing in something called Starlink, is going to be making the money for him, and I'll talk about that later. So these are the three things I'll be covering today. Basically Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink. This I'll cover next week, so I'll skip over that. So what is the Tesla's mission? It was founded some years back, and it's the second project of post PayPal. That Elon Musk also started PayPal, and he sold it, made a lot of money, which he then invested in buying Tesla. So the future, the vision that he has of Tesla is the future of all self-driving cars, where the majority of people travel by autonomous Tesla vehicles. So we're going to have a world, as it were, which will have self-driving cars, which means autonomous cars. You don't have to sit down on the driver's wheel to sort of drive it. It's going to drive itself, and you'll just be a passenger. So the software that he has developed is being added to every time he sells an autonomous Tesla vehicle today, because all that data gets sent back to the factory about the obstructions and the map or whatever it may be, so that every situation is going to be catered for. So his technology is superb, and it's going to be coming in more and more, although it's not totally usable right now. Not usable, but it is usable, but it's not as extensively used as the limitation of Tesla cars themselves is such that they're not producing enough batteries for the demand. So we'll see a little bit later as to how much they're delivering and what their prospects for the future are. So why are we betting on electric cars? Or vehicles for that matter, because that includes the trucks and the buses and the trucks, so, and even anything that moves. Now, UK and France have already banned diesel because, you know, one of the things of electricity or electric cars is that you don't use fossil fuels. And we have talked about that many times before. So by 2040, they're going to ban all diesel fuels and gasoline. So let's hope that happens even before that. Because if the cars are affordable and come out to be cheaper in terms of its upkeep, then people are going to go for it. And I think this 2040 is probably a bit late. I think even by 2030, we'll have a lot of people going for these Tesla cars. China has already got 20% of cars sold in the country. They want to have it by 2025. Now, you know, China is the type of government that lays out a particular vision and a policy, and then sort of goes at it and delivers it. So in a way, this is what Elon Musk does. He has a vision, he makes it operationally possible, and then delivers it. So you can see there is a little bit of symbiotic relationship with China as well in that regard. Now, GM claims to have 20 electric vehicles, you know, by 2025. I doubt it because GM is in a bit of a mess. I don't think anybody wants to buy GM cars anymore. Volvo is still expected to sell 1 million cars. That there might be some credulity there because they're a serious company, but GM I don't think is anywhere near the technology that needs you know, success. Now, this is where we are at the moment as far as electric car sales are concerned. Now, the time scale here is about 2020, it's just the next couple of years. We are going to be having China there, red. That's up to 14% new passenger vehicle sales by region. So you can see this making a substantive type of inroad into sales. Next to that, of course, Europe, because Europe is also sort of trying very hard to go electric. And I think these cars that are being produced in China, the Shanghai Gigafactory, they're going to be shipping them across to Germany and France soon because the capacity to produce cars is increasing day by day. So Europe is, you know, doing okay. Now, USA very bad for the moment because they're still very much under the grip of the fossil fuel industry and the cost. But Tesla is the one that's challenging them, so that'll grow quite a lot. If you look at this one here, which is going beyond the next 20 years. So within 20 years, we're going to have USA catching up, mostly to 50%, which is quite enormous. China will be up to 70% of share of new passenger vehicles by region. So this is not to say the total population of cars is going to be at that, but rather every year sale that takes place, that amount of vehicles will be, that percent of vehicles will be EVs, the electric vehicles. So you have now, coming back here today to present, the global sort of figure of electric cars the next 1 or 2 years is of this order. It'll be about 10%. No, sorry, not 10% over here, 6 or 7%. So it's a pretty low. Mostly, I think the richer countries have the electric cars at the moment. Maybe China has more, so that pulls that figure up for the global figure. Now, this ROW, that's a little mnemonic that's used for rest of the world. What it means, rest of the world, is that rest of the world is down here. So there's hardly any electric vehicles in the rest of the world, along with India as well, hardly any. But as you can see, in the next 20 years, this thing also, rest of the world and India catches up to at least 30 to 40% of the sales of cars will be electric. annually. So that's sort of a good figure to be at least looking forward to, because that's a good figure for killing off the fossil fuel industry. And of course, saving the warming and all the associated climate problems. Okay, the promise of Teslas today, according to the Department of Labor, Americans pay. See, the cost of running a gasoline car is about $2,000 a year in gasoline and motor oil expenses. So that's quite expensive. Whereas electric cars are going to be enormously less expensive to run. And we'll see later on. Now, if you have a truck that uses as much as $200,000 worth of fuel a year, so you can see a truck also can be benefited by the electric cars. Now, at the moment, the Tesla cars and everything, they rely on the grid for energy. The grid gets it from the power sort of stations and so on. But as we are seeing, Tesla is also into these batteries in a big way and solar cells in a big way. So the roofs can be generating the solar power that be stored in the batteries, and now those batteries can, be supplying it to the grid and to charging up your cars as well. We've talked about this in my previous sort of talks as well. Now here's the fleet of cars that Tesla has, for the various types of buyers. This is a Cybertruck. This is like a little station wagon type of thing with storage, quite open storage at the back. And these are different types of standard Model 3, Model Y. I'll go into that later on as to what the economics of those are. Driverless car here. That's the Cybertruck. There we are. So this is going to be also very popular. And that's the heavy duty called semi. That's the autonomous truck. It drives by itself as well. That's why the whole sort of thing is also heading towards. And we'll see what the projections of these sales are going to be in later slides. Now, as far as the competition goes, where are the other car companies that are delivering on electric vehicles? You've got this Ford here, BMW, Chevrolet, Volkswagen, Nissan, Fiat, Mercedes, Kia, Tesla. And so you can see now these two models of Tesla, when it comes to these types of metrics, the range, they're far outbeating all the others. So, and by a big factor, double or treble the times. And then the horsepower rating also enormous compared to the other offerings. So you can see how far back the other technology is and other companies are. And of course, as it comes to pricing, they're still low because there's the poor technology and backward technology. But this cost, which is high at the moment for this sort of performance, that is coming down rapidly. I mean, when you look at the 0 to 60 mph thing, 3 seconds and 4 seconds, compared to 11, 12, 9, 10, what have you. So you can see in terms of all these type of things, it's a far superior, it's more like a racing car, or even better, but which is very much affordable because these prices are coming down. Now, how are you going to charge these cars? Well, you can charge it with various outlets here. At home, you can have a wall connector. So if you, for 10 minutes charge, it can go up to 10 miles. This is another type of connector at home. I suppose it's a normal one, the 3-pin one, which can simply be connected very quickly anywhere and for 3 miles in 10 minutes. The idea of 3 miles, 10 miles and so on is so that you can charge up in case you are somewhere and don't have the regular service station to do that. Because the service station is this one, that can sort of charge you up for 50, 60 miles in 10 minutes. And of course, if you have a bit more time, can give you. And once it's charged up, what it does is that it can take you to 300 to 400 miles. But that requires a bit more charging. And at the moment, that time is also being cut down. So you can see there's a range of options in charging it so as to make it much more accessible to any type of car. Okay, here we go. This I put up in order to sort of show you that we have these range of products that Tesla is coming up with. And these are the two most popular types of cars, and they're going to be selling in this type of numbers. And we're talking about annual sales here. And you can see this is the main thing about what actually is the bottleneck. These gigawatt hours is the battery capacity. The total capacity that Tesla is hoping to have in the next 1 or 2 years is 100 gigawatts, and another 100 acquired from the manufacturers of batteries like Panasonic and so on. So Tesla not only is buying batteries to their specification, as it were, from other companies, but they also build their own. And this is the feasibility of what makes for a Tesla valuation of $2,000 per share, where it is standing at the moment today at $430 or $440 a share. So you can see this is going to be really going to go up to that value in the not too distant future, in the next couple of years, when the total sort of vehicles are going to be of this number to be delivered, and the batteries are assumed that the Tesla will have access to 200 gigawatts of it, in which case they will have revenues of $140 billion annually. And if you have that sort of revenue, then the cost of the shares will go up to $2,000 per share. And at the moment is $430. So I'm a great fan of Tesla, as you may have found out by now. Now, this is the profit and loss sheet of Tesla in the last few years. And as you can see, in the year 2020, which is also a pandemic year, it has shown 4 consecutive profitable quarters, which is quite astonishing. And profitable because they are able to manufacture enough cars to be able to sell and make a profit. Okay, there was a bit of subsidy from the government, which they were giving in order to promote electric vehicles. But the main sort of thing was that they were able to produce enough cars, despite the lockdowns, to be able to show this type of quarterly result. And it's quite likely that the next quarter also will be positive. And if it's positive, then there's a very good chance that they might be included in what is called the S&P index. Now, S&P, like the Dow index, is a measure of, it's like our FTSE. It has the big companies on the stock market, and they have an index which measures their ups and downs. So Tesla may be included in the S&P. They are not part of Dow as well, but in S&P, if they're included, then there's going to be a tremendous surge of demand for their shares, because then all these funds will be obliged to buy them. Okay, now on to the next one, which is aerospace. So the idea behind this is to make us not just be a single planet species. He says it's a show for a path to extinction. maybe so, maybe not, but to sort of really be safe, we need to be multi-planet species. So we want to explore and settle away from Earth. And of course, the one that we are talking about is Mars. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. And also, there are threats that could affect humanity, and that's the superhuman AI or the depletion of this Earth's natural resource. Because you see, our model at the moment is the economic model is all based on growth. And growth means more consumption. More consumption means depletion of the Earth's resources. And warming up if you stick with fossil fuels. So we need to be able to have some way of countering all that threat. There he is, showing off his rockets there. Okay, he's got this company which he started on his own not too long ago, in 2002, just 18 years ago. Can you believe that? Founded with the goal of making humanity a multiplanetary. And he wants to do that because he wants to make us into a seafaring civilization, spacefaring civilization. Seafaring we became when the boats were created. So now we've got rockets. So he wants to be able to sort of get up in the morning and say, exciting things to do. We want to go to the stars. That's a nice, grand dream and vision to have. There's one of these rockets that's coming back to land, the launcher. Here are pictures of those. These are side launchers of a big rocket that went up and then they're coming down. So that's why they become reusable. So they come and sit down here, which is what he has started. No other country, no other company has been able to make that idea work, but he has made it workable, and that's why his costs are so much lower. Now, why does he want to go to Mars? Well, if you look at the numbers here, the Earth is as big as, not too different. Okay, Mars is half the size and diameter to the Earth. Now, distance from the Earth, it varies. Earth is between 150 million miles to 93, and this one is 230 to 140. So it comes closer to Sun than Earth at times. So you can see it is still a livable type of environment to some extent. Temperature range minus 60 to on the Earth, 58. Let me just look at the hottest thing, 60 degrees centigrade, as opposed to Mars, which has 30 degrees. So you can see it's not completely impossible sort of environment. There are similarities there. Okay, the composition here is interesting. We are 98%, 78% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. In Mars, it's 96 carbon dioxide and hardly any, and there's a bit of nitrogen there. So we'll see now the use of carbon dioxide is very useful for Elon's project. Once the rockets go there, they're going to make fuel out of this carbon dioxide for coming back. Reusable rockets here. Now, the high cost of launching rockets has been the typical one-shot type of idea. But then, because of reusability, the cost has been reduced by a factor of 20. So the reasons for the high costs have also been the single-use thing, because you just waste away the body. And of course, the complexity and all that to make it fail-safe and so on, because you just have one go at firing the rocket. So for reusable rockets are key to making a space travel accessible. So you could say, really, he is the only one who has made it possible for space travel because of his reusable rockets. Okay, this cost reductions, Falcon rockets is the ones that he's using to put the satellites up, like SpaceLink, the Starlink. Then in 2020, in August, that's last couple of months, he has used the same rocket 6 times. See? So he's reusable type of reusability makes for cost saving enormous. But in the long term, he says, to make Mars habitable by putting 1 million people there by 2050, that's his goal. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come near to that, but it's possible. But the costs need to be further reduced, and I think you can see later as to how it happens. Okay, how space is working towards Mars. First, the reusable rocket, that's already here now. He's using that. In order to sort of send a rocket to Mars, you need to have lots of fuel. So you're going to have docking station on orbit that these rockets will put fuel, and then from there the rocket will then fuel up and take it to Mars as fuel for its journey. And then once it gets there to Mars, you need to have fuel to come back. And what he's planning to do is to use the carbon dioxide in Mars to make the type of propellant to bring you back, which is this type of metalox, which is made up of methane and oxygen. Now, he's going to be able to get the methane from carbon dioxide. 96% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide in Mars. So he's going to take that atmospheric carbon dioxide and then use the water from the surface of the Mars. There's indication that there's little water down there. So you can get that water mixing with the two and make it into this metalox. So there'll be enough fuel to be made to come back. So you can see that he's thinking out of having a project like that. Now this is a little diagram which just shows you how we're going to be going from Earth, from here, to Mars. So the launch and booster, this is one here. There's the ship, the Starship, and there's the launcher here. So both of them go there, and then it's sort of, the ship arrives on Earth orbit. So once the launcher comes back, you see that little faint line? See that comes back here. I'll show a clearer diagram later. So the launcher comes back, and the Starship keeps moving, going there. Has a refill of tankers over there, 3. Sorry, where is that 3 here? So once it's in orbit, it's going to be fueled with extra fuel tanks there, which have already been sent before and put into orbit. So it docks along with that and joins up with the extra fuel, and then is heading towards 4 refuel travels to Mars. From here onward, going to Mars, it spins around, comes and sits down in Mars here, and then leaves Mars and then comes back here and then flips over and then comes back to Earth. Now that's a little bit more detailed diagram. This is again showing you going up, the launchers coming back, and then it's going into orbit and so on. So that you can look at your own sort of time. That's another same thing here, diagram of how it goes up and comes down. This is the launcher coming back, and it comes back onto a platform called, it's like a raft, and it's away from civilization. So essentially, Elon Musk gave 2 reasons. One was that he didn't want the thing to come and crash into some base for whatever reason, but here it's safe to land. And even if it sort of fails, which it hasn't failed, well, initially it has failed, but normally it comes and lands it here because that's how it becomes reusable. Now this is the parking of these fuel tanks in orbit. So it goes around, so the next sort of Starship wants to get, it then fills up with this thing, then goes to Mars. That's just the rocket design. This is the space Starship I talked about last week, and this is the launcher. See, here we are. This comes back to Earth. This continues either as a fuel tank to be orbiting the Earth, or to take to Mars whatever equipment that needs to go with it. Now, this is a little thing about technical stuff. You don't need to look at that too much. Okay, how are we doing? I think I'm going to skip this for the moment because that will take away our Q&A. I'll cover this thing along with the other four or five of the topics that we have. And I'll make now way for some Q&A. Well, okay. Okay, everybody's unmuted, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself if you haven't, because I've done it from here. And if you're still muted, just unmute yourself, okay?
Shafiq, I
Oh,
couldn't
well,
see any of your slides. I think you had started your screen sharing, and I only had half the screen, none of your slides.
was that the same to everybody?
No.
Oh, everybody else was able to see it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about June, what happened there.
Yeah, well, maybe because I came in late or something.
Yeah,
Or did I come in the wrong way?
Yeah, it's just that I don't control that from my end because I send it out to everybody. So that should have been there.
Yes,
In any
but
case, I'll
perhaps
be
I
sending
was
you a
not there.
recording of this, June. I'll be sending you a recording and you'll be able to then see, okay, the full slides then. All right?
Thank you very much.
Shafiq,
Okay.
can you
Yeah.
forgive me? I've also got to leave now. I'm so sorry. I'm really sad, but I've got an
That's
appointment.
okay, Ross. Yeah,
I'll
that's
see
fine.
you next week. Yes?
Yeah, okay, fine.
Bye.
Just to tell you, okay, bye. Bye.
Yes, no, tell me.
Just I was saying that last time when you had your camera on, you were walking about and we could see you. All the images, you know. So perhaps you've got to be careful next time.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Ruth, you have a question.
I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about the background of Elon Musk, how he became who he is.
Yeah, Elon Musk was born in South Africa and he went to school there, and he was a very brilliant, if you like, very keen on computers. So he made a game when he was only 12 years old, a computer game, and sold it for about $500. And then while he was still at school, he made some app called Zip2. Zip2 is a file compression type of software, which he then sold to a big company for a good few $1,000, good money. And he then started to work on something called PayPal. I think you've seen PayPal, right? Yeah. And that he then was sold to eBay, I think, which paid him a lot of money, several $1 million. And all these monies that he kept on getting, he then started to buy into this idea that was going to support his grand vision. And that those ideas were three, basically. One was to have a sustainable energy for the world. And then secondly, the global internet for the whole world. And thirdly, have rockets going to, beyond the Earth to Mars, so that he wanted to make humanity into a multi-species, multi-planet species. So in order to pursue this grand vision, he studied engineering. He came to Canada to study engineering. His mother was Canadian. And then he went into physics, got a degree in physics as well. And therefore, he has not only fundamental insight into fundamentals of matter and science, but he's able to sort of convert it to reality through engineering that he studied. So you can see a vision combined with the right education is placed him to where he is now. That's why I regard him as one of the most important persons of our century, I think.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Jay Taylor.
Oh, Jim, it's Jim. It's the first time, actually.
Yeah, welcome.
I've come to the U3A. Just my question is, it's just an open question about how these driverless cars long-term will affect unemployment. If you think about it, there's so many drivers, like Uber drivers, they're all going to lose their jobs because of this. If we have driverless cars, if that's the norm, then a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Delivery people. It's just an open question. How
Yeah,
people
no, I think that's very good, because we need to also sort of keep that in mind. But if you look at our own sort of society at the moment, 80% of the job losses in USA, Europe, and in UK are because of automation. You see, and now those 80% of the jobless people have been absorbed into other areas, although not all of them. And that's why we have, I think, this fear that the jobs have been, hived off to other countries because of globalization and so on, which is also true. But at the same time, so the way that it has worked is that the corporations have found that it's easier to have things built in a lower cost areas of the world, and therefore brought those goods back and have the economy benefit from that, of consuming economy rather benefiting from it. So the basic sort of push now is to see whether we can re-educate our population for a new world. Because you remember, if you look at the old sort of model, it was based on having to educate people to fill the factories and fill the offices. Now we need to be able to think about how we are going to educate our people to use the time in a much more creative and productive way, because although we are going to be unemployed to a large extent because of automation and robotics and what have you, the fact that the wealth still gets created and the revenues, like Google having 200 billion sitting in there in some sort of Cayman Island, they need to be taxed properly, and the government should be able to get the benefit of this automation and productivity that has resulted from it. And then that money should then be redistributed to the people, like like in the form of a UBI, Universal Basic Income. So that's the model that we should be pursuing in the future, I think.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, my concern is just about the pace. The pace of change. How you're going to keep up with educating people. Actually, on a voluntary basis, I teach youngsters that are going to have to change their job possibly 10 or 11 times in their career. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a mental issue. I think there's also not a mental issue, but there's a mindset issue in youngsters. That's what I'm finding. A lot of them think they've got a job for life, and my concern is the pace of change.
Well, you see, the children are growing up with technology already in their hands, and they're much more adept at using that technology and probably much more amenable to change in that regard. It's the oldies who are in government who can't see their way through so easily. And that's why we need to bring in the 16-year-olds to give them the voting rights. At the moment, they don't have that. Scotland gives them, but UK doesn't. England doesn't. Therefore, I think there has got to be these types of changes coming in, because the newer generation coming in, I think, is probably better placed than the older generation who doesn't want to bring about the change that fast.
No, I agree. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, actually. It was strangely enough. We had one really, and I totally agree with what you're saying. We should, but I think in addition to that, there's the constraints which we've got. How can I explain it? Every country's got to have constraints, and they're psychological constraints of the older people. and also all the rules and regulations, I think. We've got to find a way to get over those and change those quickly. Do you follow?
Yeah. You see, we've got some very fundamental things to sort of consider now, because in the old, in the past, the rate of change has been slow. But because of technology and what we consider to be acceleration in technology, which means that each technology is having even more of an effect on the other technologies, and therefore there's an acceleration of change that is taking place.
Yeah.
We need to be able to have the conversation to see what sort of society that we want to be creating and how to deal with the present. Because at the moment, you see, the politicians don't even talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't know the lobbies that are at play in Parliament, but I know the City of London has a very big say in Parliament, a permanent member in Parliament, making sure that, you know, their interests are protected. We saw that in the money laundering sort of talk I did last week or week before last. So we need to have, I think, first of all, the media raising these issues so that people are aware. But the media itself is under control of so many, you know, have interested agendas of their own. So the young people are resorting to social media for their information. Now, social media probably has its own sort of issues because we don't know what is fake news and what is not. But they need to be alerted to this, and sooner or later, I think there's going to be more consciousness about the issues that need to be talked about and maybe actioned sooner or later.
Okay, thank you very much for answering it. I'll let somebody else go. I could say something else, but there's other people.
Okay, when you've got time, maybe come back to it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah, Pam.
I'm a bit concerned how we're going to breathe on Mars if we get up there. Will we have to have oxygen masks and things?
You're going to be having, I showed you pictures last time when I talked about the Starship. They've got all these igloo-like, you know, settlements, which are complete like a bubble. Each bubble is connected to the other one. So you move around in these bubbles, you know, big sheltered bubbles, as it were, which are having oxygen to breathe, and you can live, you know, like in your home, except that you can't go out. You know, you probably can see outside by having glass. You probably just see. And once you start having, I think, you know, some human presence, they'll think of ways and to make it as Earth as possible, grow trees and what have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ruth.
You mentioned universal basic income.
Yes.
I know it's not to do with what we've just done, but I'm just interested in how that would work, how that is possible.
Well, the UBI is one where everybody gets, regardless of how wealthy you are, how poor you are, you get basically an income for your enough to get your kitchen running, you know.
How could that become possible? That's what I was hoping in the pandemic, maybe we would move towards something like that. But.
Yeah, I think that has accelerated a little bit towards that. Some countries are trying it out. We are not there because you see what it is that once you give the money, people are not prepared as yet as to how to sort of utilize their time. Therefore, the process has got to start a bit earlier than the UBI, where education itself has got to be such that you are able to utilize your free time productively and not have any effects of psychology or mental issues. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay, George.
Yes, very interesting. Under esoteric science, as discussed by Rudolf Steiner and lots of other people, all these planets are occupied already. You know, it's just that there's a different form of consciousness to what we have on Earth. You know, so we have these so-called visitors to Earth who we regard as UFOs. Now, if we land on another planet, obviously we're not going to have the same consciousness as the beings already there. So would we be like UFOs to them? Because if we have to live in a bubble, that's an artificial thing. Like if you go to the moon, you can't walk on the moon. You have to have a spacesuit. In the same way as when the soul comes to the earth, the soul has to have a spacesuit, which is a physical body. So when this physical body goes to Mars, it's not going to be able to exist in a natural way up there. So would it be a UFO?
Yeah, we're going into the realm of the unseen again, as I think mentioned last time as well. I think there are all these considerations that there is life outside of Earth, but there hasn't been much evidence to date. So if you're one of those people who believes in having evidence of a sort before you can start, believing in it, that's one thing. But if one goes beyond that type of procedure, then the whole thing is open to any imaginative type of thinking. So it's a possibility. I don't think I would rule out anything because the universe is so vast. And we talked about this business about consciousness. You remember about the fact that still, humanity doesn't know what consciousness is and awareness is. And we talked about it at length last week. But if you go according to the notion that fundamentally what consciousness or awareness is the way that certain molecules and atoms are placed in our brain. If it is of a certain configuration, then it means that we have consciousness or awareness. That's basically reducing it down to some sort of, physiological type of picture. But there is nothing to stop that type of configuration being available anywhere in space. So one could say that if that configuration is available, then there would be awareness and consciousness in space as well. And therefore, we aren't the only ones, who are having the self-awareness. So let's wait and see until they actually pinpoint here as to what type of configuration of molecules or atoms that need to be there in our brain to make us self-aware. Then we can see.
Yes, but I think that what you're talking about is the consciousness and the atoms, and it's to do with the physical body. You could say the physical body is made up of atoms. Although interestingly, Rudolf Steiner also denies the concept of atoms as well, which is another thing again, which is quite interesting. But the atoms and everything else form up the consciousness, but only for this Earth. I have to go back to this point. When they went to the moon, no one walked on the moon. They walked in a spacesuit. They walked in a protective bubble. So it's like if they go to Mars, they also have to have the same thing. So it wouldn't be like living on Mars. It would be artificially living on Mars.
Yeah, what form that consciousness takes, I think, could vary with the environment. And it's quite possible, we are not the only types of carbon-based life forms that we have on Earth. It could be that there could be other life forms made up of different things other than carbon. But then the fundamental thing again there is that whether a certain configuration can give them the awareness and consciousness. So that's we don't know what makes for consciousness on this Earth as yet. Scientists are working on it, and we'll know sooner or later. Okay, anybody else? Okay, on that nice sort of note.
Thank you.
We can say goodbye and then meet again next week.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.